So it's 1999 and I am a very young, very green, very inexperienced journalist. Been doing it for about 6 months and the editor says to me, hey, I've got an assignment for you. I want to send you up north. Up north means you'll live in Karratha, but you'll cover Coral Bay all the way up to Kununurra, out to the Northern Territory border. You'll have the time of your life. It'll be you, a photographer named Rob, a four-wheel drive with a satellite phone, a couple of swags. You guys will love it. He was really trying to sell this to me and I was an unwilling buyer. I was very nervous, very inexperienced. And he gave me a couple of words of advice. He said, hey, listen, just go up there, see what you can see, talk to who wants to talk to you, experience what happens. And you've got a way with words, so just write. And so there I was, heading up north, big country, big stories, and little old me. And in a few months in, Rob and I had a couple of front page stories. We were feeling pretty good about ourselves, and I decided that I'd get on the phone and ring the contacts that I would ring every day. Some I'd ring every week, some I'd ring every month. One of the blokes I'd ring every month was a fella called Davin. Davin owned 2 pubs and a helicopter. I'd had 2 experiences with Davin that we won't go into tonight, but one was nearly hitting a tree and the other one was landing in a watermelon patch just outside of Broome. Perfectly safe. So Davin was, as a helicopter pilot, very good at pouring beers. I rang Davin one day and I said, Davin, what's going on? Mate, if you were a real journo, you'd be in East Timor right now. He was right. In 1999, the East Timorese people had had an independence vote and they decided to leave Indonesia. They voted overwhelmingly to leave. The Indonesians weren't happy about it, to the point that they rained down some of the most brutal and bloody conflict in the region seen in generations. Thousands of people were killed. Men and women were tortured. People were forced to cross the border into Indonesia so they never saw their families again. And we were basically in the middle of an international story. The Australian government responded by sending the SAS and some commando regiments into East Timor. They fought skirmishes up and down the border with Indonesian-backed militia. And here's me 6 months into the job going, yeah, that is not the sort of place that I'd like to be. No preparation, no planning, no protection. So I tried a bit of humour. I thought back to my adventures with Davin in a helicopter and I made a joke. Hey, Davin, why don't you fly us there? He paused for a little bit too long and said, actually, I've got a plane leaving Darwin tomorrow morning, got 2 seats on it. You and Rob, off you go. It'll be great. You'll have a great time. Shit. I rang the news desk in Perth. Surely they would understand that this was a crazy idea with a crazy bloke, potentially a crazy outcome. The Chief of Staff listened to what I had to say and he went, give us a yell when you get back. Rob, we're going to East Timor. Rob and I ran around to the Karratha nurse's post. We woke up the night shift nurse. We said, give us every shot we need to go to a tropical war zone. We drove 800 kilometres from Karratha to Broome in 6 hours with fuel stop. That's a record, still stands. We got on a commercial flight from Broome to Darwin. We woke up the owner of an army surplus store. Give us everything we need to go into a tropical war zone. We grabbed a whole bunch of stuff that we had no idea how to operate, got a couple of hours sleep and walked out onto a tarmac at Darwin Airport before dawn the next morning. I looked around and I couldn't see any aircraft that was likely to fly 700 kilometres across the ocean through the storms and into a war zone. But I did see a 4-seater Cessna just over there. One engine, one propeller, and what looked like a 12-year-old boy in a pilot's outfit. He walked up to me and he goes, "Ben, Rob, let's go." Gave me a small box, gave Rob a big box. That's the emergency beacon. That's the life raft. Just hang on to it in case we need it. And so before dawn, we took off into this stormy sky, lightning crackling all around us. And I looked up the front and Flyboy had switched to autopilot and fallen asleep. The first inhabitants of East Timor that we saw was a flock of goats that were on the mountainside that appeared right in front of us as we came out of a cloud. Flyboy wiped the sleep from his eyes, got us up over the ridge, and then we corkscrewed down into the airport at Dili, which is the capital of East Timor. The second inhabitant of East Timor that I saw was a bloke wearing shorts, t-shirt, more muscles than I'd ever seen on a human, cap, glasses, and a massive rifle. And he walked out to our plane, and before I could even get out, introduce myself and say, "Hi, I'm Ben from Perth." He tapped on the window and he said, "Who the fuck are you?" I tried humour again. "Who the fuck are you?" "It doesn't matter who I am. Who the fuck are you and what are you doing here?" So I pulled out our passports and handed them over. He goes, "Mate, this isn't even a fucking country. Where are you staying?" The Timor Lodge Motel. "Caught fire last night." Eventually he let us go. We got into town, and instead of staying in the motel, we decided that a shipping container out the back was probably the safest accommodation for the week. So Rob and I packed our gear into the shipping container and went about doing what we thought journalists and photographers in war zones do. We spoke to families who'd lost loved ones when the Indonesian militia had rampaged through and murdered people. We toured houses that had been burnt, ransacked and looted. We narrowly escaped an issue with a machete where a bloke was hacked to death in the markets. We did what we thought was the right thing to do. A couple of days before we were due to come home, we were going through the town and got a tap on the shoulder. And I turned around and it was our muscle-bound friend from the airport. And he said to me, "You know how you blokes drive down that road and you turn left? Well, tomorrow at precisely 10 a.m, I want you to drive down that road and turn right." And then he disappeared. It sounded like an ambush. It sounded like a setup. 10 a.m. the next morning, we turned right instead of turning left and went down that road. That road narrowed and narrowed until it was a single lane. The jungle was around us and it turned into a dirt path and eventually came to a dead end. And in front of us was a huge, stinking rubbish tip. Rob and I looked at each other. There was no way even to turn our car around. It was the perfect spot for an ambush. I got out of the car and immediately gagged at the smell. There was twisted metal, burnt out car bodies. I looked down at my feet. There was blood-soaked bandages and a mud that must have just been shit and piss. And it was completely deserted. Rob and I looked at each other and then heard something. And it was a distant rumbling, a really deep sound. And we thought, this is not good. Then over to my left, there was movement. And then to my right, more movement. And in the distance, more movement. And all of a sudden, that deserted rubbish tip came alive. And out from under the car bodies and the industrial waste came children. First a handful, then more. And then within a couple of minutes, about 100 children were making their way towards us. But it wasn't us that they were after. It was the huge army waste disposal truck that was coming down the path. They raced towards it, climbed into it before it stopped, and straight into the back of these huge industrial waste bins. They tore at what was in there, bags and bags of rubbish. Some of the bags spilled open into the sunlight. When you're starving, you take a chance at what's food and what's not. And these children grabbed whatever they could, pulled it into kerosene tins, and scrambled some more. They looked like insects crawling over this truck before it had even stopped. We spoke to a soldier who was driving the truck, and he said, yeah, they do this every morning. I point my gun at them to try and get them away, but they know I'm not going to shoot them. I took a moment then and I stopped and I put my notepad away. And I thought, if I'm really going to tell the story of these kids, the forgotten children of East Timor, then I actually need to stop taking notes. I need to smell and taste and look and feel and understand this moment. And I did that until I looked over and saw a small boy with a half full bottle with water in it. And it was like the best thing that he'd ever held in his hands. And he took the cap off and he held it up into the sunlight and poured it down his throat. And that just seemed like a moment for him where he had something that others didn't, where he had something that he needed. Then he threw the plastic bottle onto the ground and dived headfirst back into the rubbish. So that soldier, he'd wanted us to see that. And a couple of hours later, we were airborne again. Same plane, same pilot, same big storm clouds, but the flight wasn't nearly as dramatic as it was the first time. Nothing ever really would be that dramatic. Not when you've seen those sorts of things, and not when you feel like you have a story that needs to be told. So that night, in a hotel in Darwin, I couldn't sleep. But I did remember what the editor said, and I pulled out my laptop. Just right.